Welcome to episode 27 of the Write and Inspire Rawcast. In this episode, I'll talk about the risk of free tutorials and how-to videos, especially those on YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram. So especially these kind of tutorials. And before I do so, I want to emphasize, yes, free tutorials are helpful. Of course I think so. After all, I spend a lot of time and energy uploading tutorials on social media. But in this episode of this podcast, I want to share some of the limits, some of the risk, and also some words of caution for you to be able to make use of these tutorials wisely and to help you make more, let's call it, thought out choices based on my daily coaching experience as a skills instructor and also as a mental trainer. If you've been listening to my podcast or if you've subscribed to my channels for longer, you'll know that I've been a professional skills instructor for many, many years and that I specialize on teaching adult riders how to learn safely on their doorstep with my remote coaching and with my home training courses by providing step-by-step practice drills, so methodical practice catalogs and personal feedback, and that I have hundreds of riders as proof that mountain biking does not need to be dangerous and that learning skills safely, even at an advanced age, is very, very much possible. So as an international instructor trainer, I also coach and certify other skills instructors for the BICP. And as a psychological counselor and a graduate neuromental trainer, I share methods based on neuroscience and modern coaching tools to, let's call it, biohack to biohack your brain and to accelerate the learning process and to become more rounded overall. And usually I take you on my creativity walks and record my podcast out on the trails, but as it's still super, super hot here in Spain and the little bugs, I think they're called cicadas, are still out there buzzing all the time, I decided that I'm going to record this episode for you today here in my coaching office. I've been watching a lot of tutorials lately, also about actually do-it-yourself tutorials, because my partner and I, we bought a small house about 2 years ago at the Costa Blanca in Spain, and we renovated it because we bought this house from an older couple. They were both over 80 and the house was in very bad shape. And we didn't really have a lot of funds, so we wanted to renovate the house by ourselves. And then we started to watch tutorials to how to renovate the house. And then we started renovating the house based on these tutorials, and we learned a lot. And actually, I also learned a lot about tutorials in general. And that's why I wanted to talk about this topic today, because I believe that we can learn a lot from the learnings I had. So from our renovation experience and also from my experience as a coach and about the tutorials that I've been watching about mountain bike skills too, and about the tutorials that I put out into the world and what they have taught me over the years. So the first and largest danger of online tutorials about anything, whether it's mountain bike skills or do-it-yourself, so how to renovate your house, is that there is no methodical approach to them. So no one tests with you if you have the fundamental patterns already, let's call them ingrained or already set. So whether you have the foundation to perform the skill that is presented in that tutorial. So no one checks whether you're actually ready to learn what you want to learn in that tutorial. So for example, we looked for a tutorial to correct cracks in our wall, and we were just looking for that, and then we kind of got lost down the road and we didn't really know where to start. We didn't know, do we have the tools? How do you actually mix that mixture that goes into the cracks? Which cracks do you need to do first? And which cracks are actually dangerous? So is it dangerous if I just fix the cracks in the wall, but actually I should be fixing much more because there's something wrong with the house? And then after watching many tutorials and starting with it, we then said, okay, no. We actually want to talk to a pro about this because we want to find out whether there is something substantially wrong with the foundation of our house, or whether covering these cracks is actually a good idea. So then we ditched the tutorials and we talked to a friend of ours who's a builder and a constructor and a pro, and she told us that no, this and this and this is what you need to do. This is the mixture that you need. So we actually then found out that the tutorials we'd been watching only helped us about 10%. And the same really applies to mountain biking, because a lot of the skills that you may want to learn, who is checking that you are actually ready to learn these skills? And who is there to tell you whether you're covering up cracks that are a sign for some substantial problem in the foundation of your house? And just because we want to learn something, or just because we want to do something, it doesn't mean that we're actually ready to learn it or do it. So this happens a lot when clients go on the internet and they look for tutorials, how to jump a mountain bike, how to drop, how to do nose pivot turns. So they start practicing with these tutorials, which always show the end form, and then they notice that it's not working, or they get hurt on the way. And that's because no one really checked, is their body ready? Is their mind ready? Do they have the fundamental patterns already? Are they basically ready to learn that skill? If you like this podcast and if you'd like to support me, then you can buy me a coffee. The link is below. And of course, you can become a patron to support me on a monthly basis, which really, really helps me. The next huge problem that I see with online tutorials and YouTube tutorials in general is that there is no personal feedback included. So in my professional coaching experience, and that is my coaching experience daily, coaching adults of all levels, where, let's call it, the magic happens. So where real progress actually happens is when my clients get individual feedback. So when we figure out what's holding them back, why are you not progressing beyond a specific level? Why do you usually crash when this and this happens? Why don't you feel safe when you're going down this kind of trails? Why can't you ride faster than you are at the moment? These questions, when we find the causal error, so the error that is causing their stagnation and not some consequential error, that's when the magic happens. That's when they say, oh, okay, so this is what I have to work on. And to do that, you actually need someone who really knows what they're doing and who understands the whole chain of things. So chain of skills and chain, well, everything is a chain in my experience. So everything is interrelated. And there's a chain where one part of the chain connects to the next. And if you're trying to fix just one link of the chain, but you're missing that a whole other one is missing, then that's a weird way of saying. So if you're not aware that there's a whole other link of the chain missing, then the one you are trying to, let's call it, make stronger, then this will not help you to build a functional chain. And that's why really getting individual feedback is so essential. And if you just watch tutorials on YouTube, of course, you're not going to get individual feedback. And that's why all my home training courses always include my personal feedback, because I really want to find what's holding you back and then to offer individualized feedback, because every person is unique. And where you are looking currently may not be where you currently have the issues, because of course you're not a pro coach and you don't know how these chains work. So with YouTube tutorials, and especially if we're just watching them and trying to autocorrect, we may not be looking where we have to be looking. So what often happens with people when they're watching tutorials, and these are either clients that I've been working with and they used to work with tutorials before we started working together, or they take a break and work with tutorials and then come back, and this is what I see a lot, is that people practice habits or practice skills, and while practicing, they're actually ingraining errors because they are repeating the errors because they don't know their causal error. So they're trying to correct a consequential error and practicing and practicing and practicing. And while they're doing so, they are practicing their causal error. So the error that is causing the consequential error. They think they need to practice. And that's why having no personal feedback is a huge danger of YouTube tutorials. The third danger is, who is the tutorial by? So who is the, let's call it quote unquote, coach that you are trusting? Because most tutorials out there, especially with mountain biking, but also in the building industry, so the tutorials we were watching when we wanted to renovate our house, they were people like, I don't know, I think like Bob the constructor or Tim, who does these things himself. So it's a DIY guy, and he's okay at it, but he's not a pro. So he's this guy who likes renovating his house, and he's pretty experienced at it, but he's not a professional builder or a professional person in the construction business. I don't know the English word for that. But so always remember, English is not my mother tongue. So if I'm missing words or say things weirdly, then remember it's not my mother tongue. Okay, so these guys were giving tips that worked for them, but it doesn't mean that it works for you. And they definitely didn't work for us. So only when we started working with this professional construction lady, we actually got the things to work. And many of the things that we did before, we had to correct after. And they ended up kind of wonky. So everything in our house is a little, let's call it unique. But we could have avoided all that if we would have gotten her professional help straight away and not waited until we actually had everything kind of wonky in our house beforehand. So always look at, who is this video made by? Who's the guy coaching me, or who's that guy giving me that tutorial? Because YouTube tutorials are not coaching. So always look at who is doing this video. So who is recording the tutorial? Is this guy a pro coach, or is it a pro racer? Or is it just someone who learned a trick and wants to share it? Of course, it's okay. I mean, YouTube is for everyone, absolutely. I'm not saying that they're not helpful, but a lot of the time they are not helpful for most riders, because just because something worked for that person, it doesn't mean that it's gonna work for you. Especially for us women, a lot of tips that men give don't work for us because we don't have the same amount of strength. We don't have the same amount of quick strength, and we don't have the same length of limbs. And that's why often, of course, there are exceptions, but very often tips we find on the internet are not going to help. The next point that I want to talk about is quick fixes and cheating, let me call it. What I mean is that often we are looking for quick fixes because that is how our industry or how our world nowadays works. So we want big results in no time. So of course, we're going to look for the video that says, learn to do blah, blah in 5 minutes, or improve your in 2 hours. So we're going to be like, wow, this is a quick fix. Let me do that. I want it quick. But to be honest, it's unrealistic. Please stop expecting quick fixes, especially when it comes to motor learning and especially when it comes to high risk maneuvers at mountain biking, because it's just going to frustrate you. Having unrealistic expectations is really one of the main reasons why people get frustrated when the speed of learning does not match what is promoted, because it's unrealistic. So please start really acknowledging that learning is going to take time, trust the process, practice over time, get personalized feedback, and take your time to work your way up slowly. And then you will have success. I have hundreds of clients aged 60, 70, or even 80 that are making amazing progress, but none of them will really learn to bunny hop in like an hour. So it takes time, and it takes more than a few hours, and usually also more than a few days. Of course, you will see progress, but you won't see that magic thing just happening from one day to the other if you don't put in a lot of work before. You will see sudden things click, and you will see huge progress within a few hours, but only if you've worked a lot before, if you have that foundation, and if you have progressed methodically, which is very hard if you only work with YouTube tutorials. Next point is racing is not coaching. A lot of the tutorials out there are by professional racers. And yes, of course, they have amazing skills. Yes, of course, we can all learn from them and we can watch them and they can inspire us, but they are not coaches. Thinking that a pro coach is just as good as a pro racer and vice versa is basically trying to learn English from the fastest rapper out there. You wouldn't do that, right? You wouldn't look for the fastest rapper and say, okay, teach me English. No, you would look for a professional English coach. And the same applies to mountain biking. Racing requires a specific skill set and coaching requires a different skill set. And if you have a pro racer, then he's probably going to focus most of his energy on making himself better as a racer. And if you have a pro coach, he's probably going to spend most of the time becoming a better coach. And both skill sets require practice, both skill sets require hard work, but they require different skills, so different work. And this we need to acknowledge because a lot of people think that if he's a successful racer, his tutorials will be the best. And a lot of people will, especially youngsters and young men, will send me emails going, who the hell do you think you are? You don't even race. So why do you think you can teach me anything? And that's the biggest problem, that racing and coaching are not the same. The next tip I want to give you is that mountain biking is super multifaceted. So mountain biking is not mountain biking. For you, you need to find out what your kind of mountain biking is. I say this a lot on this podcast, but you need to find out what really lights your soul on fire. So what is it that you define as mountain biking for you, and not what the industry or YouTube or anyone else tells us mountain biking is. And then you need to find a methodology, so a recipe to start working on that mountain biking to make it safer and more fun for you. And that's why we shouldn't generally trust YouTube and generally trust the highest clicked videos, because just because something is popular, it doesn't mean that it's right for you. So really find what mountain biking means for you. Find that little niche or niche, I don't know how to pronounce that in English, that is mountain biking for you, and then pursue that with a coach that fits to you or with a methodology that fits to you. So not everyone needs a coach. If mountain biking is just a fun hobby, you want to do a little bit and you don't want to seriously get into like big tricks or big skills or risky maneuvers, you probably won't need a coach. And if you've always been an autodidact or someone who taught everything to yourself by yourself, you probably won't need it either. But if you're 30 plus, or maybe even 40 plus, you're interested in learning skills safely, step by step, you don't want to get hurt, then yes, working with a professional coach who focuses on safe learning, who focuses on step-by-step progressions over time, and I mean weeks to months, then yes, you will profit from this a lot. You will learn safely. You don't have to crash. And if you want to do that with me, all you need to do is work with my home training and my personal feedback, which you will find below this podcast. And then you can reach that. You do not need to crash. You do not need to hurt yourself. You do not need to be, let's say, badass to reach your goals. But there are different types of mountain biking, and I really want you to find your type of mountain biking instead of doing what's popular just because it's popular. The next, probably even the biggest danger about YouTube tutorials is that there is no step-by-step safe methodology in the videos. In other words, yes, there will be like the end form. So for example, it will be, these are the steps of the bunny hop. You first do this, then you do this, then you do this. Or when you want to jump, you have to do this at the takeoff, you do this in the air, and you do this at landing. But no one will tell you how to get there first. What is the foundation of that? And how do you practice that step by step before you even get to that skill? And once you are at that skill, which step-by-step methodology do you need to follow to practice what you want to learn, because we do not learn skills by watching. We need to practice, but we need to chunk the move into tiny parts, and then we need to practice the right movements in the right order. And of course, we need to practice the right movement patterns. This is again where personal feedback comes in order to ingrain them, in order to make them automatic, and then we can put them together, and then we can start applying them out on the trails. And if we do this too early, we're just going to practice errors. That's something that I already said before. And that's why these are like my main concerns with YouTube videos. I also, of course, I know they are free, they are fun to watch. A lot of them are entertaining. It's great that they're out there. They help for a lot of things. I also watch a lot of tutorials, especially when it comes to renovating my house and doing my gardening and things like that. I'm grateful for each and every one of them, but we should know where their limits are, and we should know when we're actually gambling with our safety. And when it comes to mountain biking, I think a lot of the tutorials out there are pretty dangerous. And in my full-time experience, I've seen so many riders crash because of tutorials, crash because they didn't know whether they were ready for the skill, because they didn't follow a safe methodology, because it seemed so easy in the video. Everything looks easy when you're good at it, and mistaking that looking easy for being easy is something that can really hurt. Do share this podcast with someone who you believe will also profit from it. Thank you so much for being here till the end. That's all I've got for you. Much love from Spain. I'm Coach Roxy.